Hey everybody, my name is Brad Hayes. If you don't know who I am, I'm the director of Outstretched Hands of Romania. I'm generally considered to be a missionary to Romania from the United States, but since I've lived there in Romania for 19 years now, I consider myself personally to be a missionary from Romania. And it's Friday, March 27th right now, and I'm in Whitewater, Wisconsin, and I've been getting a lot of questions about where I am and how I'm doing, and I wanted to use today and use this video to launch a kind of a campaign we're saying from Outstretched Hands from our organization out to the global community as far as we're connected in different countries and from the States, here in the States, Canada, Romania, Austria, Germany, England, Norway, Ireland, Mexico. And, you know, this time in history is so different than what any of us have ever experienced before. And I just felt strongly to do this video today as the beginning of what we're going to do as an organization up at least until the end of April. And I thought it would be good to share with all of you some things that I've learned going through a personal tragedy. And I'm going to get to that story in just a minute. But this video will be going out today on my Facebook, and then from the Outstretched Hands Facebook, and then from our Outstretched Hands website tomorrow or the next day, and then from my email program, and then be shared all over the place. So and that's really going to be how all these messages will be handled over the next month or more. We want them to be a form of encouragement, or to build faith, or to give hope, or to also to be used in, and I'll explain this at the end, to ask for prayer requests. And so we want to be praying for people who want to be prayed for, and I'm going to tell you a little bit later how to do that, but why. So my story that I'm going to share with you in a couple minutes is the foundation, of the basis for the prayer requests, and then the praise reports that come from answered prayer. But probably you've never met anybody or heard of anybody who has flown like I have through three of the last big major problems in the world. I was flying at 911. I remember on that day, 911, we were, as a family, we were about to move to Romania, and we were closing on our house. We had cleared it out. We were just about to leave the house and then to do our final packing and then fly the next day, when all of a sudden 911 happened in New York City. And it was real. It happened, and it was a tragedy because many people died that day. It's in the moment it seemed like a big problem for the world, and it was, but it was more isolated, of course, compared to what we're going through right now. But I learned some things during that time, and then in 2010. Many of you might remember there was a volcanic eruption in Iceland, and I remember that day was a Wednesday. It was April 14th, so it's almost 10 years ago, and I was leading a group from the States back over to Romania. I think there was about maybe 12 people in the group, and then the volcano went off, and we were flying, our plane was flying over Iceland when it happened, and I was sleeping, and the plane was turned around and sent back to Chicago. And then I woke up and I was watching the map and the flight tracker for the plane, and I noticed that we were headed back toward Chicago, and I asked one of the stewardesses what was going on. And then she explained to me about the volcanic eruption, and that was definitely a crisis, and it was a major inconvenience and loss for myself and for many people. And I don't know if you remember that, but one of the statistics I heard was that 40,000 people were stranded for about 6 or 7 days in the Heathrow airport in London, England. And so it was a major change in many people's lives, and it was a big loss of money. But it wasn't, I'm not aware of anybody who died at that time, but it was a major, major inconvenience. And of course, if you're going through the middle of that, something like that, you're not happy. It's very disruptive for your life. But that week was probably the worst week in my life. And I want to talk a little bit about that. And then over the next days and weeks, when I share a message like this, I'll be talking a little bit about right now the COVID-19 crisis that we have. But and this is a legitimate crisis. It's a tragedy. There are many people who are dying. It's very traumatic. It's very disruptive. It's causing a lot of financial loss, way beyond anything I think that any of us could have imagined before. But I want to share a little bit more about back in 2010 and what that week was like for me. Well, it started at the beginning of the week, and I don't want to talk anything about it right now, but it was something very personal, very deeply hurtful for me that happened, and it affected many people on that day and in the days after that. And it was very confusing. There were broken relationships that happened, and I thought that was really, really bad, all that happened. But then fast forward a couple days, of course, there's the flight through England and then on to Romania. That really never happened. And so that was on Wednesday evening. The flight was turned back, and then most of us who were on that flight were put up in a hotel in Chicago for a couple nights because nobody really knew what was going to be happening. But basically, all the flights in Europe were totally shut down because of all the volcanic ash that was in the air, and it was just too dangerous. And of course, the airlines lost a lot of money. But on Saturday, April 14th, this became, in the middle of that week, became a real near fatal tragedy that happened in our family. And I want you to know from the beginning that this is extremely difficult to talk about, but it will lead to really I think the most important lesson that I learned, and that we can learn from what I went through and how I was helped through that crisis, through that very difficult time. And to the best of my knowledge, I've never really talked about this publicly because it's still even very emotional for me, and as my family hears this, if they're watching this video, it'll be very difficult for them to listen to, but I think it's important to share it at this time. So if you see me beginning to get emotional, and if you see me putting my head down and looking around, just know that I'm really trying to collect my emotions. Well, after the airlines realized that they wouldn't be having any flights, they told us that we had to get out of Chicago and go to wherever we were from. And so I had 10 luggages that were all in my name from the group, and so I had to find storage for them. And they had already gone back to Wisconsin, to Milwaukee, Wisconsin, where I'm originally from. And so then I took a bus up to Milwaukee, and I went to my friend's home, Kent and Cynthia Rosina, where I normally stay when I'm in the Milwaukee area. And I remember it so clearly, but it was probably like 10:30 in the morning, I think it was, and we were sitting at the kitchen table. And I got the phone call from Romania. Well, on that day, there were a couple on our team who were getting married, and everybody from our team and from our church were there at that wedding. Boy. This is exactly why I kept putting off doing this video. So I get this phone call, and it's the pastor of the church there, and he says to me, he says, he thought I already knew what happened. But he said to me, Brad, it's incredible. And he speaks pretty good English. He said, Brad, it's incredible. John is alive, my son John. And immediately the phone went dead, and I couldn't get a hold of him anymore. It just, all the phone lines were blocked, and I didn't know what to do, and it really shook me to the depth of my being. And I remember putting my head down on the table, and in a moment like that, somebody can tell you that you need to pray, and you know you need to, and you have to try. But Kent and Cynthia started to pray for me, and of course I didn't know what to do, and so I kept trying to make some calls, and then finally I got through to Romania, and I began to get the story of what had happened, and this is what I'm about to tell you. Well, about just 15, 20, 30 minutes before I received that phone call, my son John and a friend of his, and then 3 girls, one of which was my daughter Bethany, and 2 of her friends, they were at the wedding. And then they had the idea to go out to there were some like empty train yards, an empty vacant or abandoned train yard that had lots of train carts that had not been used for years. And so they went there just to spend some time, and then the idea came for John, my son, to get up on one of the train carts and to do a handstand. And that when he did the handstand, he'd kick his feet up in the air, and then his friend was waiting at the bottom. He had the camera all framed in, ready to take the picture. And so John put his hands on these bars, and he said, "Okay, Abel Bistriano, are you ready?" And Abel said yes. And so Abel had the camera kind of like this over, and so he could see it with his eyes, but he could watch the camera as well. And then Bethany and her friends were on the train cart next to the cart that John was on. And so there it was. John kicked his feet up in the air, and just as he kicked his feet up in the air, the photo was taken, and his feet hit or entered within an inch or 2 of 2 electric power lines that were live, and 27,000 volts of power of electricity went through his body, went right through his heart. And he was immediately paralyzed, and he fell down on top of the train cart. And Abel Bistrian did exactly what all of us would want ourselves to do, or would hope that somebody would do for us in that moment. And he just instinctively went into save mode and hero mode, and he put the camera down, and he climbed up on top of the cart, and he grabbed John. Well, when the power hit John, it exploded, and there was such a loud noise that people from 2 blocks away heard it, and they actually had heard that same sound before, and they knew what had happened. They knew that somebody had just been electrocuted, even from that far away, because it was a well-known problem that had never been resolved by the city of Kalarash, where we lived. And so the girls were not watching, and they turned around and they saw the scene with John on fire. He was on fire, and he was paralyzed, but he was conscious after the first seconds at least. And Abel yelled over to them to get down on the ground and to start praying. And they did. Of course, the 3 of them were very much in shock, and they were legitimately in shock, but they started praying, and they really turned what should have been a funeral into a place of worship. And they were three warriors who went into warfare, praying Bethany for her brother, the two other girls praying for their good friend, and praying for Abel. Abel took John. Took John off the metal bar that he had fallen on top of. John was on fire, his clothes were burning, and Abel took John on top of him. Keep in mind that Abel was in an electric field. Actually, just 1 week earlier, we didn't know it at the time, but we learned that an 8-year-old boy who just had been close to the cart, but on the ground, as he got close to the cart, he was electrocuted and he died. And Abel took John on top of him and he started putting out the fire and encouraging John and telling him that he was going to live and that everything was going to be okay. Well, about that time, Abel called to the girls and he told them to go back to where the wedding was. It was couple blocks from there. And they ran back, and of course they were all in shock. Two of them, if I remember correctly, just ran past everybody. They didn't even know what to say. They didn't have the right words, and they didn't even know really what was happening. They didn't know if John was alive or dead. And one of the girls, as she ran by the crowd of people who were outside the wedding, just said 2 words: tough stuff, but said, "John, dead." Ran into the bathroom. That message, "John, dead," made it into the rest of the wedding, into the reception actually, and were the first words that my wife Nora heard about her son, not knowing anything else. And so people started leaving the wedding, leaving the reception, and started running outside. They didn't even know where to go, and the crowd started going towards the train yards, and eventually everybody from the wedding ended up there. And then, of course, somebody called for 911, and then an ambulance came, and the police came, and it was John was alive. He was on top of the train cart with Abel, who was staying there with him. And of course, many people were standing around. But the police who were there told everybody they could not go up on top of the train cart. They stopped them and wouldn't let any help to come to John and to Abel. And then eventually, a couple of the guys who were there on our team, to their great credit, I think consciously knowing that they were really risking injury or even death to themselves, they asked the police, asked the ambulance if they could please go up and get John to help Abel lower John down, and the police agreed. And of course, there's pictures of all these things. There's a picture, that same original picture of John getting electrocuted. You can actually see the arc of electricity going into John's body. But I didn't want to put that in this video at all. And so they lowered John down, and these 3 heroes, Abel with Marcel and Terrence, and they eventually got John into the ambulance, and everybody was just so thankful that he was alive. But John was badly injured, very, 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 very bad. And so, and nobody really knew exactly at the time how bad it was. And so they took him first to the hospital in Colarache, and they told our family that really that he needed to go to Bucharest, and so he was put into I think the same ambulance, and then there was a small caravan of people who escorted the ambulance to Bucharest. And that was the beginning. That day was a near fatal tragedy that happened in our life, and we're always thankful, especially for Abel, and whenever I think of Marcel and Terrence and everybody else who helped to lower John down and away from that cart and into the ambulance, and we're praying. Our whole family experienced something that I'd only ever heard of or read about up until that time. And honestly, I think it was a healing actually for me in that whole time, because I would say that I was very cynical of how a lot of times people are, including myself, and how churches are and how Christians are. But I saw that day, and I saw in the following weeks and months what can happen when people gather together over something that's important and a common focus, and they take their eyes off of themselves, and they are there for people who are legitimately going through a tragedy, traumatic situations, very challenging and difficult and confusing, disillusioning, hurtful. There's just so many different words that we could use to describe things that we go through. Well, we got John on his way to the airport. That's when the phone call came to me in the States, and I got that news. And so there was a short time there that I didn't know anything about what was happening with John, and I just knew that for me this was, wow, could the week get any worse? But he got to, the Lord himself was good, and the Lord himself was faithful to us, and took John into the middle of the best burn center in all of Romania. And in the best burn center were two doctors, a husband and wife team, who day by day took care of our son. And we were, we were blessed, and received help from the Ronald McDonald House in Bucharest. Some of my family members stayed there. We had people who gave money so that our daughter Emily could fly over there. We had people staying in our home. We had people cleaning our home. We had people making meals for us, for our family there. And it was very difficult for me because I was stranded in the States. Nobody could fly from the States. But eventually I got out, and with a layover in Munich, I think it was, eventually I got to Romania to see John. In 1 month, and this is an amazing thing, that we received, just in 1 month, we received 8,000 Caring Bridge messages, people expressing their love, expressing how they were praying for us, wanting to help in any way, sharing the prayer requests, 8,000. And these are just messages that we received. Those 8,000 messages came from, I think, 15 different countries in different parts of the world. And our family knew that we were loved and we were appreciated, and we knew that people were there for us. Our local church in Colorado did a great job to help us with everything. And so, like I said in the beginning, this is a very difficult story to share, but so that was a near tragedy for us. There was a lot of trauma for John especially, and all the pain. He was burned on 65% of his body. Of the 65%, 35% were third-degree burns, and he had to go through all the skin grafts. And it was just a very, very difficult time. But people were there for us, and we're so thankful. And that's what I'm trying to say, is that there's some this right now, like for me, this COVID global pandemic is not it's not a tragedy for me, but it is a huge crisis, and only time will tell how deeply it impacts all of us. Right now, there are a lot of people who have suffered loss. Right now, there are a lot of people who need prayer. Right now, there are a lot of people who are forgotten, and they're isolated. And so that's what we learned is community becomes actually the presence of God. That's why there's so many Bible verses. There's almost 100 alone in the New Testament. I call them the one another Bible verses about pray for one another, comfort one another, love one another, encourage one another. There's a lot of different things, a lot of different to help one another, to serve one another, to be affectionately kind to one another, to consider one another, to there's just so many of them. I have a big list of them printed out for me just in case I wanted to look at them. But there's so many things that we can do. So in the middle of your being isolated or quarantined, think about people who maybe are very much hurting right now. Think about people who they need to hear from you that you love them. Reach out to them. Pray for people, but we as an organization, this whole trip here, it's a normal fundraising trip that we're as an organization that we're always very dependent on. But once I got to the States here, basically every meeting, every public speaking event, almost everything that I came here to do was totally lost. But this right now is a time to give. This is a time to love people. This is a time to accept one another. That's another one of the things that I actually see happening even in the American government. As much as they're going back and forth and arguing and fighting with one another, I think I'm seeing progress even with that. Is that why? Because they're coming together over a common purpose, a common focus, and it's urgent. And they're putting the needs, at least by and large they are, of others first, and they're working together and trying to do what they can. And so this gives people hope, and we all need hope at this time. So what I want to do now is invite any of you to write with any prayer requests that you might have or that you want prayer for other people. You can write to my Juno email if you have it. It's Hayes Romania, Hayes ROMANIA @juno.com. You can write to the Outstretched Hands of Romania website. There's you can contact us through that. You can contact me, Brad Hayes, on my Facebook page. Maybe you're watching this on that. We're going to be posting all the prayer requests that we get. And we have a prayer team actually already assembled in Romania, our team. Plus, we have people here in the United States added together. There's about 100 people who already are ready to pray over the prayer requests, and we want you can put your name on it, you can put just your first name, you can put where you're from, anything that would help us to know what your situation is and what you're going through. It doesn't matter what you need prayer for. Please write to us, and then also let us know if you see any change in your situation that you would say is an answer to the prayer. And then also from those 100 people or so that are going to be praying, I would say there's potentially thousands of people through our network of partner churches who many of these prayer requests will be going to in Romania. They'll all be translated. They're going to be prayed over every day by many, especially the people on our team in Romania. And really, I want to thank you for doing that. So if you because you're giving us an opportunity to serve you, to give to you. Maybe you've lost your job, and maybe you don't have any money. Maybe you just have a very, very difficult situation that you're going through. Please write, please ask, And one thing's for sure is the Lord does care. The scripture says that he is a present help always in times of trouble. That's Psalm 46 verse 1. But I really, like, for us as a family, we experienced his present help in our time of trouble through the presence of the community of people, family, friends, even strangers all over the world, people that I'll never meet or never met up until that point, who were praying for us, praying for John. John was like a celebrity in different parts of the world. Praying with their children for my son. I mean, who in the world am I that somebody like that somebody on the other part of the world would be praying for John and my son and my family? But we're very, very honored, very blessed to receive the love by so many. And I hope that, if you receive something from this message, I hope so. I hope that it motivates you to reach out to people. You can watch the news, you can find out all the latest statistics and all that, and it's a very, very difficult, challenging, hard time. I heard somebody say that they actually were so optimistic, and they said, "Wow, this is really a good time because so many good things are coming out of this situation, this crisis." Well, I personally would never say it like that. No, I don't think this is a good thing that we're going through it all. But at the same time, a lot of times we have to go through very difficult times. We have to go through crises. We have to go through trouble. We have to go through trauma. We have to go through very negative things often to wake us up and to get our attention to rise up and to be more the kind of person that we know that we can be and that we should be, and to take our eyes off of ourselves and get out of our own little world and our own little bubble. So maybe you're hibernating and you're under quarantine and you're staying away from people. I understand. But don't lose the opportunity to take your eyes off yourself and your situation and put them on somebody else. Elderly, especially during this time, it's very difficult to be quarantined. But you can make phone calls. You can contact them. You can write to them. You can find a way to reach people that you love or that you've heard who are going through a difficult time. And so that's the message today: is be part of the community that reaches out and loves people and looks for ways that you and that we can give and to share and to encourage and to serve and to give hope and to comfort and to pray to people. But it takes a considering. You got to think about it. The Bible says in Hebrews chapter 10 to consider one another and provoke one another towards love and good works. That's exactly what I'm doing with you right now. So this is just the beginning. We're going to be giving out short and longer types of messages over the next month or more. The longer messages like this is the longest one I'm sure that you'll receive. But they'll be coming from Romania. They'll be coming from people on our team there. There'll be little updates about what it's like for them there under quarantine. Almost all